It's great to be here to welcome so many of you from so many different disciplines today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. The presentation I'm going to make today is jointly prepared by Emer and myself, but since we haven't yet mastered the art of collective speaking, when I say we, it's because it's Emer and myself together. However, each of us comes here with our own specialised language honed over years through our training and professional lives. So standing here, it feels a little bit like I'm negotiating a minefield landscape. And if in my exploration, I take the blame if I do this, of this shared terrain, I inadvertently detonate one of these landmines, I do hope you forgive me. On the understanding that this is not a process that aims necessarily to achieve a consensus, but values the creative tensions that may arise in it. So the new UCD O'Brien Centre for Science in which we're sitting was built to provide a transformative centre for science research and education in Ireland. And the Art and Science programme, now with the 10-year commitment from UCD College of Science, is an element in the delivery of that vision. It's a practice-based programme centred on dialogue and exchange, and it has 3 strands which I'd like to briefly outline. In an undergraduate module of exchange called Tunnelling Art and Science, students and staff from Fine Art of NCAD and the UCD College of Science engage in a dynamic process of shared knowledge and identifying points of mutual interest, leading to creative studio laboratory experiments and new work exhibited publicly. The UCD Science Artists in Residence scheme first ran in 2012-13, and it's the second strand of the programme. Scientists from all areas of research have been collaborating with artists Mark Cullen, Emma Finucane, Siobhan MacDonald and Maeve O'Connor, reimagining their research in inspirational and transformative ways. And the artist studios that you see here have quite literally been transformed from former first-year physics laboratories. Finally, the third strand of the programme, not only does UCD Art and Science encourage these high-quality interdisciplinary practice, exploration and collaborative partnerships between staff and students and artists and scientists, but it also provides a platform for enhancing and developing the cultural life of the community through seminars, performances and exhibitions. So how did it all start? Well, it started innocently enough in 2010. I was then head of the School of Physics, and I wanted to show the face of modern physics to the world and basically cheer up a dreary corridor. My initial idea was simple, or so I thought, was to get a professional to make a set of glossy posters highlighting the cutting-edge research being done in the School of Physics. However, Emer, having heard of my quest from elsewhere, came up with an intriguing alternative proposal. And her interest was to explore the human experience of scientific research through a series of portraits of the women and men, academics, administrators, researchers, students and technicians, all of whom are needed to allow the subject to develop and progress. I found this intriguing because her proposal put people at the centre of the science story, whereas often in science we take great pains to remove ourselves from it. Over several weeks and then months, she spoke with the people in the school about their work and reflected her findings in a series of contemporary portraits, still to be seen provoking conversations in physics 4 years on. For Emer, the conversations opened up a vast and mind-blowing field of new subject matter, new technologies, and new methods of investigation. But not everything was new in these conversations. She recognized in the people she talked with the same relentless and passionate curiosity that drives all creative inquiry. For me, it was a revelation that Emer got what we were about so well. And it was like that feeling as a teenager when someone cool fancied your best friend. I remembered what it is that I loved about physics and astronomy. And the immediate impact for me was to look for new ways of capturing and communicating the dynamism and joy of scientific research in my own field. But that, as they say, is another story. We then sought to reproduce our experiment by adapting this collaborative model of working to undergraduate students in both our disciplines. Are art and science really as mutually exclusive as our institutional structures and curricula might have us believe? Or could our students communicate across this divide? So we set up the Tunnelling Art and Science module between UCD and NCAD Fine Art, and thanks to Philip Napier, Head of Fine Art in NCAD, and Porix Dunn, Head of the School of Physics now, for their continued support for the module. And the name tunnelling came about as an attempt to capture the nature of the enterprise, not simply crossing or bridging disciplines, but really subverting their traditional boundaries. And in physics, tunnelling has a specific meaning that also seemed appropriate, being a quantum phenomenon in which subatomic particles can traverse seemingly impossible hurdles. So did you know that a spark of electricity can be created from two running streams of water? It's called the Kelvin water dropper experiment and is just one example of the many projects that the students have carried out during their tunnelling projects. Doing the experiment using found objects and away from the laboratory acts as a catalyst for further conversation and exploration. The process itself is important for learning, not just getting the right answer, but creating the space to generate more questions and further inquiry. And in this case, attracting the attention of passers-by and drawing them into the process of experimentation itself. And this is an aspect of science that is rarely highlighted. The sheer unbelievable fact of it, that we can do it. That it isn't dry, it isn't dead and purely fact-based, but a living, changing subject, open to exploration from many different angles. So there isn't an absolute truth that scientists have to uphold about the world. At any given time, there may be certain bedrock principles and agreed ways of conducting the process of science. But as scientists, we are constantly reinventing our paradigm of what we understand to be true and constantly questioning received knowledge. And new knowledge will emerge from answering new questions. Science begins in the imagination. To do science is to be constantly questioning and renewing your vision. It's to look at something anew with new eyes all the time. And this process of rigorous questioning is as familiar in artistic processes as it is in scientific inquiry. So working with artists allows questions that wouldn't necessarily emerge from within the closed world of one's own specialized language, a language which may in the end actually cut us off from deeper understanding if we don't find a way to communicate out of it. Why is this important? Understanding deeply how things work is a prerequisite to taking correct action. So to give you some flavour of how this has been working in practice with the UCD artists in residence, we'll show some examples of their collaborative processes during the last year. So Maeve O'Connor and Tamara Hochstrasser discovered many connections in the way they work, their shared values, and their environmental concerns. They presented their environmental vision and concerns in a public forum at the Red Stables 2013 Art and Ecology Summer School and engaged the audience in a dialogue about how our society nurtures the aesthetic and natural aspects of the environment it depends on. And they extended this article they extended this dialogue in an article written for a resulting book. And Maeve is currently working on a sculptural piece inspired by her interactions with marine biologist Emmanuel Renaud, meteorologist Connor Sweeney, and Tamara, and that will be shown here later this spring. Siobhan MacDonald's work explores processes of entropy in geological time. Much of her research before the residency had been developed in Iceland, and this work immediately resonated with geophysicist Chris Bean and his colleagues and led to Siobhan joining their field trip to Iceland last summer. Siobhan's work on the residency has more recently led to a collaboration with campus company NBio, who use charbone to make surfaces for satellites. And everyday encounters take on a new significance in this context because the scale and the depth of the research taking place opens up, and often through chance conversations, unexpected sources of inspiration. And so materials and technology used for space exploration have found a place in Siobhan's processes and are given new life through her work. The work of Emma Finucane and cognitive scientist Fred Cummins found a natural synergy through their shared interest in how we communicate with each other and how this in turn affects the quality of our lives. Their work on joint speech and Fred's research on brain activity during chanting has led them to work with the monks of Glenstall and the Hare Krishnas in County Fermanagh. So between each artist and scientist, a unique model of collaboration arises from drawing inspiration through conversations, through to co-authoring work. In the case of Emma and Fred, they have collaborated so closely that Emma has been participating in Fred's scientific experiments, and Fred has been co-creating video and screen prints at Blackchurch Print Studio. And Emma and Kieran Regan are collaborating and making work in response to the crossover between his research interest as a neuroscientist into adaptations in neuronal circuits and Emma's interest in visualizing processes of communication. The value of this process to the artists and scientists is evident, but of course the wealth of this knowledge and process needs to be shared to have wider impact. And Mark, Emma, Maeve and Siobhan are working towards an exhibition in the Science Centre that's going to run throughout the coming year. So we thank the artists, the scientists and students who have so brilliantly engaged with this programme. We'd like to take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks to the artists who have opened the residencies to even more opportunities that we just couldn't have foreseen. And of course, we're looking forward to this coming year's residencies, which will be announced shortly. The success of this programme also depends crucially on the participation of UCD scientists, of course. And so we really look forward and urge you to get involved this year. And as Joe says, who knows where it will lead. So finally, a word of thanks to the Art and Science Board, especially Drs. Finola Cronin and Kieran Crilly, and most especially our college principal, Professor Joe Carthy. Thank you for your attention.